I'm back. Did you miss me? It has been about maybe 2.5 weeks since I have recorded an episode. I was out of the country, walking, hiking, sipping good wine, having a good time with friends. And then I had to come back to the bullshit. So apparently can't have good things anymore. I leave and things just got out of hand, out of whack, out of pocket. Girl, what is happening? I literally left for 2 weeks and it's like I came back to a different country. I think we should ground this episode. This episode is brought to you by fascism. Let's talk about fascism. Okay. We've been hearing a lot about it. All the liberals are talking about fascism. So here is your layman's version, your cocktail hour understanding according to ChatGPT. So let's get into it. What fascism is. Fascism is a type of extreme right-wing dictatorship where one leader or ruling group demands total control. Does that sound familiar at all? It mixes intense nationalism, America first, strict obedience, suppression of opponents, silencing critics, banning free press, and controlling elections. Have we seen gerrymandering going on? Have we seen a lot of political interference happening lately? So the core ingredients of fascism: one strong leader, like a man named Trump, as an example. Us versus them. We have heard a lot of that from him, right? What is considered American? Not me, not a white man. So it's either white man or the other, right? That's kind of the idea here. Control of society. Let's talk about Jimmy Kimmel. Let's talk about Stephen Colbert, right? Control of society, which includes schools. So what does that look like? It can look like a book ban. Media, we just talked about that. Culture, we're going to talk about the FBI calling trans folks nihilistic, violent group. They're literally 1% of the entire population. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Violence and fear. Like the Supreme Court basically upholding racial profiling can stop anyone on the street. ICE can stop anyone on the street and say, oh, you look Mexican, South American, you speak Spanish, so we have to check your ID. Creates a lot of fear, right? And then destroying of democracy, hollowing out elections, courts, freedoms, super terrifying. How that shows up in real life. So marches, flags, slogans, MAGA, opponents branded as enemies of the nation. Okay, rights shrinking little by little, free speech, protest, press, self-explanatory right there. Red flag checklist. Ooh, okay, let's look at the red flag checklist. Do leaders attack the free press and label critics as traitors? Called fake news. Are minorities, immigrants, or opponents scapegoated? Percent. Is there talk of a true nation that excludes some citizens? Brown, gay, trans, women. Yep. Are courts, elections, and checks on power being undermined? Yes. So the Supreme Court, again, upholding that racial profiling with ICE is totally fine, where the lower courts have said, no, that's totally illegal. You can't do that. It violates the Fourth Amendment. But the Supreme Court says, oh, yeah, cool. Totally no problem. Granted, it's a shadow docket. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in a second. Do supporters glorify violence or intimidation against rivals? I'm just going to leave that one open for you. Here's some historical examples of fascist leaders. Benito Mussolini. So he invented fascism. He ruled as a dictator with militarism and censorship. Hitler. And Francisco Franco from Spain. Okay. A military dictatorship, crushed opposition, and aligned with fascist powers. In short, fascism is when a government demands unquestioning loyalty, crushes freedom, and puts one leader and the nation above all else, usually at the expense of minorities and democracy. So when people are talking about the fear, existential fear, meaning the immediate fear that we are turning from a democracy into a fascist society, that's what it means. There's too many of those examples or definitions happening right now. In such a short time frame, we have accelerated into fascism. And it is extremely terrifying. We'll talk about maybe some tools that we can use to fight back. but the biggest thing that you can do is be aware that it's happening. So let's talk about what should we talk about first? Let's talk about the Supreme Court. I think that one's pretty interesting. So there's this thing called the shadow docket, which it can take a long time for the Supreme Court to say, we want to hear this case. Not every case obviously gets to the Supreme Court. It's the highest court in the land. It is now 6-3 conservatives and 3 liberal judges. And the shadow docket is when they don't hear the full case during session. So they're not in session right now, but they take these kind of emergency cases and what they call a shadow docket. In the shadow docket, they don't have to give all the full reasoning of why they're making that decision. They don't have to give all the examples of history and past rulings and the law and everything. They basically just say, this is what we're going to say for now. We'll come back with more later. So with racial profiling, basically what was happening was these lower courts. And this idea of lower courts, it can sound like they're just like some backyard court. They're not. Multiple layers of courts before you get to the Supreme Court, right? Which would make sense. You have ones that are federal judges and federal courts that can still be, Southern California. One of the most famous ones is Southern District of New York, which is a very, very powerful area. And they basically said, no, and this violates the Fourth Amendment right. You can't just stop people based on how they look and based on what language they speak and just search them. That's unlawful. That's un-American. You can't do that. It violates the Constitution, which sounds reasonable and smart and normal. And instead, it went up to the Supreme Court in the shadow docket, and they said, yeah, totally fine. ICE can stop whoever they need to stop. If they're speaking Spanish, you got to investigate them. What are the implications of that? If I am learning Spanish, which I am, right? And estoy practicando mi español. If I'm talking to somebody and then my last name's Garcia, they can start searching me and asking me if I have my papers and, what's my immigration status. We know that Kristi Noem, Kristi Noem is the head of Homeland Security, has rolled back ICE agents to basically no requirements to be an ICE agent, to be running around at 18 years old with a gun. They're wearing masks. You don't even know what they look like, who they are. They clearly are not going to have the mental acuity. They clearly don't have the training because they're just throwing money, resources, hiring fare to get these people, these ICE agents on the streets. So you have people that are really probably out there for the wrong reason. So you can see where this can go really bad really quickly. So that's one. Okay. That's what's going on with the Supreme Court. That was super terrifying to me. FBI. So allegedly, I'm going to just say allegedly, I'm sorry, Kash Patel, podcast host turned FBI director, looks coked out of his mind, allegedly. I'm just going to put it out there. Look it up for yourself. This man does not look well. He is now saying that trans people, which represent less than 1% of the population, just think about that for a second. They're spending this much time. If it was a drinking game, you'd be wasted within 5 minutes. The amount of times that right-wing MAGA Republicans say trans people, you'd be wasted, okay? You'd be on the floor, you'd be passed out, 1 tequila, 2 tequila, 3 tequila floor, okay? Done. They are saying that the FBI is labeling trans people as a violent, nihilistic threat. You know who's a threat group? Gun owners. Not all of them, but there's a ton of people that shouldn't have guns. We don't have we know all the things, right? Children are dying in schools. Okay, let's just talk about gun deaths for a second. I'm just going to segue into that. The number one leading cause of children's death from ages 1 through 17, so we're talking about literal children, is gun deaths. 12 die every day from guns. But you are investing your time in 1% of the population that is doing nothing against you, just living. They are saying that the gender that they were born with, their anatomy does not match the gender inside of them. But that is where you decide to put our American tax dollars and resources to, but not to the amount of children, 12 children dying every single day. I want you to just think about that for a second. That's what podcast host turned FBI director Kash Patel is focused on. So the nation's leading law enforcement is focused on that. Okay, let's talk about the Charlie Kirk of it all. You ready for it? I'm going to get canceled just for saying his name. So let's go on the journey together. Charlie Kirk. Let's start with some of his greatest hits. Okay. I'm going to read you a couple of lines of this man that is being framed as the hero of this generation. Charlie Kirk said, prominent Black women didn't have the brain processing power to be taken seriously. This is a quote. Stoning gay people is God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters. Trans people are to blame for inflation. It's not tariffs. It's not the policies we put in place. It is not the world trying to rebound after COVID. No, it's trans people. Can you explain a little bit more? Oh, no, we can't. Okay. Well, anyone that is murdered is sad. It's sad. A child losing their parent, sad. Gun deaths, they don't need to happen. There are things that we can do to prevent it. We're not, because of money, because of power. So all of that aside, the man was a horrible human being. Not saying it was right. Obviously, it's not. Murder is illegal. It is immoral. It is horrible. There are different ways to have discord with people that have opposing belief systems that you do. We live in America, which previously believed in free speech. We apparently don't anymore, but we should be able to have conversation with people that believe something different. What seems absolutely ridiculous is the Senate passing resolution to have a day of remembrance. This man was not a military officer. We have the flags at half-staff. There was huge controversy, and I think it was New York and where I live in West Hollywood, California, with the flags being at half-staff. We do that when something like 9/11. We do that when Jimmy Carter, a former president, has passed away. We're doing that for someone that didn't believe that half of America should even exist. That Black women didn't have brain processing power to be taken seriously. This man deserves a day of remembrance and flags at half-staff. Let's just talk about some other times the Senate or the president has passed a day of remembrance. JFK's birthday, Martin Luther King, Jimmy Carter, former President Jimmy Carter. Did you say Charlie Kirk is in the same realm as JFK or Martin Luther King? I wouldn't. I don't even think they're in the same time zone. They're not in the same book. I don't even know if they're in the same language. Okay, so they're clearly trying to make him a martyr. It is about social media as a weapon. It is about algorithm. It is about division. It is about inciting a war. It is about stoking the flames. It is about making your anger so loud you cannot hear the other person. That's what this is about. And he is a martyr for that cause. And I'm sure he would be happy to be a martyr for that cause. Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, Sheriff Chelsea Handler was still on. She would be canceled right now too. It's absolutely absurd. It is literally the First Amendment. It is the first thing that we went back to the Constitution and said, oh, you know what? Hold on. You should be able to be allowed to say anything mostly within reason. But Trump doesn't want any kind of voices of dissent. He does not want anybody with influence, anybody with a following, social media following. They're comedians. They're talking about what is actually going on in this country. That's like the history of late night. Instead, he's pressuring FCC, who is the federal commissions who oversee the broadcast license, to put pressure ABC and these other companies, other smaller radio stations, television stations, to not broadcast anyone that he doesn't like. So after Stephen Colbert, then he was going after Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Fallon's going to be next. This is what we're doing. And now I think it's tonight, Friday night, they're airing a Charlie Kirk memorial in the time zone, in the time spot of Jimmy Kimmel's show. I mean, what is happening? This show was designed to have like a fun balance, but I'm sorry. I came back from vacation. My beautiful little vacation bubble was just completely wrecked with all of this nonsense and this terrifying air that you can't help but breathe. You know, what is the drink of the week, girl? You know what the drink of the week is? A tequila shot. Because this is bananas. It is so absurd. It is so terrifying how quickly all of this is happening. And I just came from Europe where they embrace diversity. Yes, the country is smaller. Sorry, the continent has so many different countries next to each other. So your countries are smaller and people have to be more embracing because there's so many different cultures that are bordering all around them. But you go to a restaurant and you go to a hotel and they're speaking 5 languages. They're speaking English, they're speaking Spanish, they're speaking French, they're speaking German, they're speaking Italian. You go to a restaurant, they have English and Spanish and French all right there for you. You go on the train, there's multiple languages. Everyone is so accommodating, so helpful. And then you come here and you speak Spanish and you might get pulled over by ICE and thrown in prison by some 18-year-old wearing a mask that has no training and just has hatred in his heart. I mean, the contrast is so night and day. So I don't really know where to go with this other than just creating some awareness. So I am going to put in some resources. If you live in California, one of the things that you can do is vote yes on Prop 50. And this is trying to help balance the gerrymandering of the congressional seats that happen in Texas. So that is something that you can use your power and your vote for, which still has so much significance, which is why they're trying to make it smaller and smaller and smaller. And they're trying to create a lot of confusion around it. So that is one thing that you could do. I'm going to give you some other tangible resources right now as well. Okay, Culture Caucus. We've gone from sipping wine in Europe to the Supreme Court's profiling mess, to the FBI scapegoating trans folks, to the absurdity of Charlie Kirk getting a day of remembrance, to Jimmy Kimmel catching FCC heat, and finally, the heartbreaking fact that gun violence is the #1 killer of kids in this country, which I cannot even believe. So what do we do with all that? We fight back. And here's the thing. Fascism feeds on silence and fatigue. It wants you to feel tired, to feel powerless, to feel small, to do anything. But we are not small. We are messy. We are loud. We are brilliant. We're queer. We're chaotic. And we are resilient as fuck. And there are so many ways to plug in. So resources for action, voting rights, the Brennan Center for Fair Fight, the League of Women Voters, Queer and Trans Liberation, ACLU, Lambada Legal, the Trevor Project, Trans Justice Funding Project, Racial Justice, Color of Change, Movement for Black Lives, Showing Up for Racial Justice, Gun Violence Prevention, Every Town, March for Our Lives, Brady Campaign. Look, fascism isn't just one big evil villain. It is death by 1,000 paper cuts. Court cases, hate groups, disinformation, campaigns, unchecked violence, but resistance works the same way. 1,000 cuts of joy, protest, laughter, solidarity, and action. That's how we push back. That's how we're going to win. So don't just doom scroll. Pick one lane, make one call, send one donation, show up to one meeting. Be the loud queer at the school board or vote for your friends. That ripple matters. You matter because surviving here is already resistance. Thriving together, that's revolution. Until next time, I'm your host. Stay queer, stay in the fight, stay messy, stay loud. All right, Culture Caucus, I'll see you next week.